The ancient Minoans, the Keftiu, were black people. Here we see the Keftiu bringing tribute to Rekhmire, governor of Thebes in 1400 BC. The Minoans were blacks or Sub-Saharan Africans. We know this because of the Greco-Roman documents and Minoan iconography. Granted, many other Minoan murals appear to resemble Europeans, but these artifacts are fake, or repainted artifacts to deny the original African ancestry of the ancient Cretans. This view is supported by Kathy Geer in her book, Kenosis and the Prophets of Modernism. Mary Beard wrote, "The truth is that these famous icons are largely modern. As any sharp-eyed visitor to the Heraclean Museum can spot, what survives the original paintings amount in most cases to no more than a few square inches. The rest is more or less imaginative reconstruction, commissioned in the first half of the 20th century by Sir Arthur Evans, the British excavator of the Palace of Kenosis, and the man who coined the term Minoan for this prehistoric Cretan civilization, after the mythical king Minos, who is said to have held the throne there. As a general rule of thumb, the more famous an image is now, the less it is actually ancient." In other words, Sir Arthur Evans did much to make the Minoan artifacts look like Europeans. Many of these paintings are fakes. Most of the dolphin fresco, for example, was painted by the Dutch artist, architect, and restorer Piet de Jong, who was employed by Evans in the 1920s, and whose watercolors and drawings of archaeological finds in Athens, Kenosis, and elsewhere were featured in a 2006 exhibition at the Benaki Museum in Athens, curated by John Papadopoulos. The Prince of the Lilies is an earlier restoration from 1905 by the Swiss artist Emile Guillon. Here we have the original and restoration of the mural. In this case, it is far from certain that the original fragment, a small piece of the head and crown, but not the face, part of the torso and a piece of thigh, ever belonged to the same painting. Here we have another artifact from Minoan. Here we see three ladies. This artifact is found in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I quote, "This group of three women was originally restored by E. Guillaume Pierre on the basis of other fragments of frescoes from Kenosis, mostly of a much smaller scale." End of quote. Note the error within the red outlines. Look carefully. These are supposed to be the original fragments upon which the restoration are based. Also note that on different restorations, even the fragments are different and show different skin color for the same fresco, which is proof that they were faked. But as you can notice, instead of these colors being the white skin associated with these women in this fresco, we see that the skin color is really brown and red, the color of black people. Euronets never give up trying to white out blacks from ancient history. As a result, you have to repeatedly show how false their propositions are. Population genetics cannot change history, and archaeology except in the mind of the confused and promoters of Eurocentrism. The Greeks made it clear the Minoans came from Africa and were descendants of the Garamantes. The Garamantes founded civilization in Minoan, or ancient Crete. The Garamantes were Mandi speakers, not Berbers. The Tuareg did not come from the Fezzan. They originated in the east. According to Tuareg tradition, they originated in the Tal Filaf El Tiflet, an important oasis of the Moroccan Sahara, and migrated from Morocco to their present location in the Fezzan. Ever since Arthur Evans discovered the hieroglyphic and linear A writing of Crete, there has been a search for the authors of this writing. Some Grecian traditions indicate that Libyans called Garamantes formerly lived on Crete. This suggests that the Edo-Cretans may have spoken one of the ancient ancient languages of Libya. Etio-Cretan is just another name for the ancient Minoans. Etio simply means that these people were the first Cretans. The name Garamanti illustrates affinity to the Mandi morphology and grammar. The Mandi people live in West Africa, along the Niger River, and all the way to the Atlantic coast. The Mandi language is a member of the so-called Niger-Congo group of languages. The name for the Mandi tribe is called Mande. Mande is made up of two words, Ma, which means mother, and Inde, which means children. In other words, the term Mande can be interpreted as children of Ma, or mother's children. And we find that the Mandi had a matrilineal descent. The word Garamanti can be broken down into Malinki Bambara also. What we get is Ga, hearth, arid or hot, and Manti, Mandi. The name of the Mandi-speaking tribe means that Garamanti can be interpreted as Mandi of the arid lands, or arid lands of the children of Ma. This last term is quite interesting because by the time the Greeks and Romans learned about the Garamanti, the Fezzan was becoming increasingly arid. The murals from Thera show how the Minoans really looked. Here we can see murals from Thera. You can see the rich brown and red colors of these Africans who lived in the Aegean Sea. The Garamanti found a civilization in Minoa, or ancient Crete, and the Fezzan. The Garamanti, as I said earlier, were Mandi speakers. Greco-Roman mythology gets the hype because Eurocentrism presents it as their own history. Although they present much of Greco-Roman mythology as European history, much of this is really talking about the black people, talking about the original black people that ruled in the Aegean Sea. Homer, for example, was called Xanthos. Xanthos means black man. The leading character in Homer's books were Negro or black men and women. There are many light-skinned Africans who have never mixed with Europeans. Apollo in Homer's Iliad was called Chrysaorus, bearing a golden sword. Artemis is Eustephanos, which has no relation to fair. Neptune is Cyantrochus, bluish or blackish like dark deep waves of the ocean. Achilles was Xanthos, brown. The Mycenaeans were not black either. Homer claimed that the Mycenae ruled by Agamemnon in the Iliad. Agamemnon is described as Xanthos, which means brown in Greek, not white. Agamemnon is in direct descent from Apophis, the black ancestor of the Pelagic house. Aeschylus in Prometheus Bound describes Epophis as swarthy of hue, and that he originally lived in Africa. The Pelasgians were the first settlers of the Greece region. The first migrants of Greece, or the Garamantes, were recognized as a black tribe. They were known to the Greeks and Romans as dark-skinned. In Ptolemy 185, a Garamanti slave was described as having a body the color of pitch, or woolly black. The Garamanti lived in the Fezzan, or Libya, not Turkey. The first anatomically modern humans in Europe carried mtDNA haplogroup M, and the Y chromosome, or male gene, for these blacks was R1b. The whites did not enter Greece until after 800 BC. These whites that entered Greece came from Asia Minor. The Egyptians called the Cretans Keftiu. There was agreement between the Keftiu names recorded by Egyptian scribes T. Pete in an article called the Egyptian Writing Board, and Mandi names. The ancient Minoans, or Keftiu, were Mandi speakers. Ever since Arthur Evans discovered the hieroglyphic and linear A writing of Crete, there has been a search for the authors of this writing. The authors of the writing of Minoan linear A is right in front of our eyes, and this were the ancient Mandi people. The ancient Minoans, or Keftiu, is obvious that they were Greek in this name Keftiu. The root of Kef and Keftiu probably is Kebe, the name of a Mandi clan. plus the locative suffix I used to give the affirmative sense, plus the plural suffix u. Thus, Keftiu simply means a Mandi clan. When you look at many of the names that are associated with the Keftiu, we find that these names agree with the Mandi names. For example, Shri agrees with Sia. Nsia is the same as the Mandi name Nsia. Then we have Kish, which goes with Kia. Then we have Prentope, and we know in a sense that among the Mandi, they had the name Beni for twins. Then we know Dim, which agrees with Dimba, and Ras, which agrees with also the Mandi name Rasa. As you can see, this analogy between Keftiu and Mandi names is startling. This linguistic data complements the historical data, confirming the Mandi origin of the Minoans. The evidence of similarity between Keftiu names and names from the Mandi languages appears to support Graves' view that the Edio-Cretans, the first Cretans, were early settlers of Crete, and that they spoke a language similar to the Mandi people who lived near the Niger River. Consequently, there is every possibility that the linear A script used by the Keftiu is analogous to the Libico-Berber writing used by the Proto-Mandi. This is further supported by Campbell-Dunn's hypothesis that the Minoan spoke a Niger-Congo language. I deciphered the Minoan or linear A writing a long time ago, and much of this writing you can find in my book on ancient African decipherments. In addition, because the Keftiu were Africans, the haplogroups carried by the Minoans would have been African haplogroups. This view is supported by the Minoan DNA and the ancient DNA from Anatolia in Egypt. Lazardus et al. In their 2017 article called Genetic Origins of the Minoans and Mycenaeans argues that the Minoans were Caucasians because they carried Anatolian DNA. Just because the Anatolians carried similar DNA does not prove the Minoans were Caucasians. The Minoans were blacks from ancient Kush. These Kushites belonged to the Hatti and Kaska nations. Many people forget that the Greco-Romans recognized that there were two Kushes, one Kush in Africa and the other one in Asia. The Asian Kushites lived in what we call the Levant today, or much of Asia Minor, Mesopotamia, and places like that. One of the most important black tribes, or Kushite tribes, were the Hatti and the Kaska. The Hattic people are related to the Hatyu, one of the Egyptian Delta Tehenu tribes. Many archaeologists believe that the Tehenu people were related to the Sigru people, also that lived in Nubia and the Fezzan. The Hattic language is closely related to other African and Dravidian languages. We find mention of the Hatti people in reference to the Tehenu people. During the 5th dynasty of Egypt, 2563 to 2423 BC, during the reign of the pharaoh Sahure, there is mention of the Tehenu people. Sahure referred to the Tehenu leader as Hatti Tehenu. These Hattiu correspond to the Hattic-speaking people of Anatolia. The Hatti Hurrian people often refer to themselves as Kaska or Kaskas. So again, as we can see, among the ancient Egyptians, they didn't really call the Kushites, which is mainly found in some of the Meroitic writing and also in the Bible, but they called these people Kash. So Kash. The generic name for Kushites in Egyptian literature was Kash. The Egyptians often referred to the Kushites as the hill people. This is supported by the various meanings of Gardner's Egyptian sign N25. The N25 sign from Gardner's list of Egyptian signs reads as Kash, Kesh, which meant Cush. The Hyksos kings were not Semitic speakers. They were proud of their Kushite origin. In the Hyksos seals, the kings wrote their names followed by the word Haki Kas. And Haki Kas means king of the Kushites. The Hyksos kings, they did not speak a Semitic language. They spoke, in a sense, a language that was more related to the Niger-Congo group of languages. In the Hyksos inscriptions in their sealings, we have primary contemporaneous ancient Egyptian literature that document the fact that the Hyksos did not call themselves Semites, they called themselves Hakik Hash. In other words, they called themselves kings of the Cushites because they belonged to the Cushite nation. Because the Anatolians and the ancient inhabitants of the Levant were Cushites, the DNA they carried had to also be African, not Eurasian. Researchers have found that the Minoans carried the maternal DNA haplogroups H, 43.2%, T, 18.9%, haplogroup K, 16.2%, and haplogroup I, 8.1%. Other haplogroups carried by the Minoans include U5W, J2U, and X. These results correspond to the Anatolian mtDNA, or maternal DNA. In this map, you can see that many Africans carry Minoan DNA, namely haplogroups U, J, H, and other class. Because Europeans carry these DNA, geneticists claim these haplogroups are non-African. In the research literature report the presence of this DNA as evidence of Eurasian African admixture. But this is false, because there is no evidence of Europeans mating with Africans in Central, West, or even Middle Africa. The Mandi speakers include the Djola and the Mandikan. These are just the names of some of the so-called West African Mandi groups that they put into their literature. Instead of just classifying them as Mandi, they would call them Djola or Mandikan. Researchers have found that the Mandikan or Djola carry 2% Eurasian admixture. The people in Mali carry the N and H haplogroups, just like the ancient Minoans and Anatolians. Did you hear that? Mandi-speaking people carry the N and H haplogroups. The highest concentration of U5 is found among Berbers in Northwest Africa. U5, which is found among the Minoans and the Anatolians, was also carried by the Mandi-speaking people and the Fulani in West Africa. The Djola Mandi speakers also carry mtDNA M1, H, and N. The U5 haplogroup carried by the Mandi, like other West Africans, is characterized by haplotypes 16189, 16192, 16270, and 16320. The presence of haplogroups U5, M1, N, and H among the Mandi speakers supports the linguistic evidence concerning the Keftiu, or the ancient Minoans. The Y chromosome of the Cretans also indicates the Cretans were blacks. Laissel Martinique, in an article called Paleolithic Y Haplogroup Heritage Predominates in the Cretan Highland Plateau, provides a detailed discussion of the Y chromosomes in Crete. Y chromosomes are the paternal or male line. The presence of Y chromosomes R1b, TK, and H in Crete indicate that the Cretans were blacks, because this DNA was also found in Anatolia, the Levant, and Lower Egypt, which would be northern modern Egypt, which was also settled by Cushites as proven by the Hyksos inscriptions and sealings. Lizardus et al. In their 2017 article illustrates that the Minoans shared haplogroups with the Mycenaeans. Lizardus et al. Makes it very important that we understand that these haplogroups were African. In this illustration, here we see a summary of the Anatolian maternal DNA. After cursory examination of the table, we find mtDNAs U, T, N, 1, and K among Anatolians. This is not surprising. It was just a reflection of the black Cushites that dominated Anatolia and Minoan Crete, because we also found in Minoan Crete these same haplogroups U, M, and N. Further confirmation of the African origin comes from the Abusir mummy DNA. The genomic data from this period for Crete and Anatolia is also found among the Abusir mummies. This is important because the people of Abusir at the time would have been primarily Egyptian. As a result, the mtDNA carried by the Egyptians at Abusir Malik confirmed the reality that the so-called Eurasian haplogroups are nothing more than African haplogroups. And Figure 1 is modeled on Suleiman et al.'s 2017 article on the Abusir mummies. The researchers report that there were 100 mummies in the study. A total of 27 of the mummies were dated between 992 and 749 BC. In Figure 1, you can see the clades carried by these Egyptians. The frequencies of the haplogroups among the Egyptians at this time from this study were, and I'll only mention some of them, but you can see them on the screen, U18.5, T22.2, J18.5, and now you can look at some of the other haplogroups. The presence of these haplogroups among the Abusir population shows that the U, T, and J clades had a high frequency among the Egyptians, and that many of the so-called Middle East clades were already present in Lower Egypt before the Greco-Romans, Turks, and etc. ruled Egypt. In conclusion, the ancient Minoans, like the people of Thera, were blacks or Africans. This fact is supported by the Greco-Roman traditions and Minoan iconography, and, as we discussed just now, the DNA. Although the Thera murals have been faithfully preserved, Sir Arthur Evans had the murals he discovered on Crete repainted so he could deny the African ethnic origins of the Minoans. These recreations are nothing more than fakes. Finally, the mtDNA UTJ and N clades and the Y chromosome R1 among Anatolians, Cretans, Lower Egyptians, West Africans explains the close relationship between Minoans and Anatolians. All of these people were Kash, which equals Cushites, who had come from Upper Egypt and the Fezzan. Yes, the Minoans were black. Yes, the Minoans were Mandi speakers. Yes, they can tell us much about their history. Yes, the Egyptians knew that the Keftiu, the Cretans, were an ancient African people.